So here's the thing with Penguin. First of all, the name is ridiculous. I'm done with the little good names. But
Panda was better.
Penguin is kind of like the cousin of Panda. Sounds so stupid when I think about it.
Next one's very
The core big picture concept is that Google now and other search engines to some degree have so many more data points that they have all these other signals to corroborate what they see when they go out and crawl the web. Social signals, we call those corroborating signals. So they see link growth, they see activity, all this cool stuff. Now they have all these other things to look at to see, check that out and say, is this legitimate? A big part of that is audience and human activity. They have millions and millions of people that use their toolbar. They have millions and millions of sites that use their analytics. They set cookies, and they have a browser that no matter what you do tells them who you are and where you're at and what you're doing. So from that standpoint, if you just grasp that big concept, you can start thinking about the kind of things that, I always tell people that, I'm not a mathematician. I work in a world of algorithms, and I literally, if there's more than 10, I take off my shoes and count with my toes. I'm just mathematically illiterate for the most part. I hated math, but you don't need that to be effective in this business. And the way that I approach things is I think like an engineer. What would I do if it was my engine? When I see issues that are gaping holes in this algorithm, I think about how I would sit down. I think about what Matt Cutts would sit down and say to his team, and how he would instruct them to go try to fix things. And that opens up the door to the kind of stuff that I would look at for corroborating signals. The biggest takeaway with Penguin is that it really is the cousin of Panda in the sense that Panda was about identifying thin, weak content on your site that nobody's engaging with and penalizing you for publishing it. Penguin is about finding thin, weak content that has links to you published somewhere else, basically. So this first wave of Penguin is very strong on links and not the other over-optimization stuff yet. But that stuff's coming. And the other thing that it's good to understand is that Google tests this stuff in various formats for a long time. So we first started seeing the anchor text filtering around. There's one advantage also, by the way, of networking. And I'll mix these things into it. And I always tell young kids, what makes me a better SEO than you really isn't the knowledge as so much as it is my Rolodex. Because when I'm seeing something, we sit at a certain level and have X amount of clients, so I have a lot of data to look at. But what's more important, I can pick up the phone and call the guys that run the largest newspaper organizations in the world and ask them what they're seeing. And I can use their data. I fly all over the world and go to conferences in foreign countries and dress up in lederhosen and do silly things, not just to drink the beer, because the beer in Oktoberfest is very good, but to hang out with the people that know a lot of stuff and have access to a lot of things. So we started seeing them testing anchor text filtering shortly after they rolled out caffeine, summer of 2010. And over the years I've seen, so anytime Matt makes a comment where he says, we've been working on this thing, I usually know what he's been working on because I've seen it impacted. And they like to test in certain markets. Travel, a lot of crazy stuff is tested in the travel space. So they started automatically filtering for excessive anchor text. And the idea is, if you believe in, I'm a huge fan of modeling. And everything we do is about modeling what the profile of a quote-unquote good site. We can all sit down here and come up with a list of 5 sites that we know for sure Google trusts. And if you look at what their backlinks look like and how they're structured, that's what I always strive to replicate as best I can. I want to create a petri dish environment where I can accelerate that, but at the end of the day, I want that to look like the footprint and mimic of what's out there. And then I was probably doing that before Google did it, but once they started learning how to do that, doing things like filtering you for being too obvious. You do competitive research, and you look at anchor text, and I know right away what your money term is because you're telling your SEO guy out there to go build links for that money term. It's like nowhere in the real world do you have 60% of your links say blue fuzzy widgets if you sell blue fuzzy widgets. that only happens in this world, our world. That's not how I mod links to stuff, right? URLs, domain names, and when you start modeling these patterns, it becomes pretty obvious and pretty easy to see how you could create some type of filter that would run against that database and look for these thresholds and ding sites that exceed them. And so that's what Panda is on the volume of content side. You have to be high up the food chain to have a lot of volume of content. And that content needs to be supported with external links. It has to have signs that it's valid content, and you have a lot because people are demanding you to create good content because you have an audience, right? So the footprint of a non-Panda slap site is a site that has a lot of deep internal linking, thick articles that are worth reading. It's not what eHow used to be. Oh, I used the brand name. I'm not supposed to do that. But you know, those type of sites, when they were just cranking out pages for the purpose of ranking for those kind of phrases, you land on them, go, oh, that's great, not what I wanted. You hit the back button, you leave. You never link to it. You didn't do, and nothing else happened in all this pool of signals. It tells Google that this is in fact a valid page. So step number one, how can we ding sites or demote sites that have way too much content in their reputation, their audience, than they've earned? And it wastes our time. That's the other thing too, is that you think about there's only so much time in the day. If I'm out crawling and crawling and crawling and crawling, and I got to dig through 2 million pages because your SEO went, hey, let's crack that database. Google like search queries and stuff. And out of that, there's a couple hundred pages I'm willing to serve to my users. That would annoy me. If it was my age and that pissed me off, I'd be like, that's a waste. So it makes sense that I would demote your whole entire site because you make me churn through a bunch of crap to find a few nuggets that are good. So Panda is the first way. Penguin is kind of the extension of that, and it applies to more distribution and duplication and things like that. So the idea is, in the real world, in a legitimate footprint, near duplicate or duplicate content happens a lot. The AP puts a story out on the wire, LA Times picks it up, New York Times, and you can see this ripple. And now this article will be crawled and indexed with no canonicals or no index, no blatant signs to Google to control any of that. But also what happens is each site that reproduces that site gets links to their copy because they have their own audience and their own readership, right? So they can track and see that growth of links as this duplication ripples across the internet. When you pump in a bunch of, you take an article and spin it or whatever, and you go into the easing articles, article bases, all these sites, that was the big rage, was article marketing. The people that are scraping and regurgitating and that stuff are spammers. From an algorithmic, not passing judgment on their business models, but from an algorithmic standpoint, now Google sees a wave of similar high volume duplication, but there's no signals being generated on this page. Nobody's clicking on the links in it. Nobody's reading it. There's no RSS subscribers. It's sitting on a page and it's being used purely to embed a link to help somebody rank. And they can see that. It's really, really easy to see. So the amount that your content can be syndicated and duplicated is directly proportional to the size of your audience. And so you don't want to any longer go out and do that kind of stuff. So that's phase one of Penguin, is definitely link focused.